Welcome to Cleaning Up the Mental Mess. I'm your host, Dr. Caroline Leaf, and I am so excited to interview one of my special friends and great lady, Kimberly Snyder, we just recently had such a fantastic conversation on your podcast, and I felt like we needed more time. So I'm so pleased to be interviewing you now about your newest book, Beautiful. You are more than you think you are. I love this, Kimberly, because it's so much related to a lot of the work I've done for years, and that's working on people's identity. But you just do it beautifully. Before we dive in, thank you so much for coming on my show.
Well, Dr. Leaf, I always love talking to you. We have such an amazing vibe, a connection.
We do.
My listeners love you too. So thank you so much for having me back on or having me on another conversation.
It does. It feels like just a flow between our podcasts. We'll just have to do this often because it's great. Yes. Okay. So for those of you in for such a treat, Kimberly Snyder is a spiritual guide, meditation teacher, nutritionist, holistic wellness expert. She's a three-time New York Times bestselling author of 5 previous books, including Radical Beauty, which you co-authored with Deepak Chopra. You to host a top-rated feel-good podcast, founder of Saluna, holistic lifestyle brand. I mean, you've just done so much. Digital courses, practical enlightenment meditation, and the Saluna Circle. She's been featured in dozens of media outlets, including Good Morning America, The Today Show, The Wall Street Journal. You're just seriously, amazing. Okay, so
Thank
this
you,
book. I so enjoyed this book, and it's wonderful. So this book is coming out this week, so people can get their hands on it. And you say at the back something that really touched my heart, because it's something that I say in different words. I like the way you said it, though. Many of us think we just aren't enough, not good enough, not pretty enough, not rich enough, not happy enough. But just because we think we're something, that doesn't mean it's true. You are more than you think you are. Teaches you how to revise your belief system, fulfill your deepest dreams and desires, and create an epic and successful and inspiring life. Why did you write this book? I mean, we need this, seriously, but what made you write this? Because you've been in food. I mean, that's been your big thing, has been, food. So you've now shifted so you've obviously seen something in the work that you've been doing over the years. So tell us about you a little bit more, and tell us about why you wrote this book.
So this is a great question, Dr. Leaf, and I'm so happy you asked this first. So when I started out, I didn't really know exactly where my life would take me, what I would do with it. I at one point thought I was going to be a doctor. So I went into college with a partial science and math scholarship, and then I interned in a hospital one summer and decided that it wasn't for me. Wasn't
for you.
To put it lightly, but I ended up working for a year. I saved some money, and then I decided to travel. I decided to backpack. I wasn't feeling very good in myself, Dr. Leaf. I had really low self-esteem. I'd been healing from eating disorders. I had a lot of acne, a lot of bloat. I gained a lot of weight in college. I was seeking, and I didn't really know what I was seeking at the time, but I was trying to escape, I think, the restlessness and the anxiety. And so traveling seemed like a way to go and explore. And I thought I would travel for a few weeks, Dr. Leaf, but it ended up being over 3 years.
Wow.
So I did it really cheaply. I was living out of a car in Africa. We spoke on our podcast. I was in Zimbabwe and all around Africa.
Yeah.
And I sold my car at the end. I lived out of my car. And then I was in Asia for about 18 months. And the reason I bring this up is because I was out of the Western world for 3 years. And I was so open at that point. I was receptive. So I was taking in all these new ideas about beauty and about health and wellness and who we really are. And one of the places that had the biggest impacts on me was India. So the first time I went, I was there for about 3 months, and then I kept going, and then I went back again for some months. And this is where I started to really learn about yoga, which means union. It's not just about the poses, as we know. I started to learn about yoga for the first time in meditation, and particularly from someone named Paramahansa Yogananda, who's the great yoga guru who brought yoga to the West.
Yeah.
And
yes, it's over here.
Exactly. A lot of the teachings I talk about in the new book are based on his teachings. And so anyways, I came back to New York City, Dr. Leaf, because I'm from the East Coast, and I had family there, and I was starting to apply these teachings. And even though I didn't have any money, even though I didn't have real direction, I was starting to work with the energy inside of me. So much of this is pratyahara, withdrawing the senses just from out here in the ego, over identifying with what's going on and coming in and concentrating into the spine. And there's a lot of science in my book as well, which shows how when we're doing different yogic techniques, including focusing on our third eye, it actually activates different parts of the brain. So anyways, I was applying these teachings, and I still didn't know what I wanted to do, Dr. Leaf, but I was starting to see patterns emerge. I was starting to see more synchronicities in my life. And so I was starting to teach yoga, actual yoga asanas. I was going back to nutrition school. I started a free WordPress blog. And I only told my yoga students about it. And my yoga classes were quite full, but I didn't know anything about SEO or marketing or anything. I was just sharing this blog. And the blog started to spread throughout New York City. And then my first celebrity found the blog. And to this day, Dr. Leaf, I don't even own a TV. So I certainly wasn't trying to get into that world. But then I started working with her, and then I got on a film set, and then I started meeting all these other actors and producers. And then the next 5 years of my life were really, a lot of the focus was working with these celebrities, traveling around the world, helping them really feel their best, which was never just about the food. It was really about meditation and emotional health and well-being and this holistic lifestyle I call my 4 cornerstones. But the funny thing about the story is that then I started going on shows like Good Morning America. I was a regular when I was there in New York. All this stuff started to happen. And then the first book deal came. So HarperCollins came to me, and my first editor was Sarah. And I actually had an idea for a book. I had a manuscript called Catching the Fire. And it was the teachings that were in this book. And it was a travel memoir. And so she then looked at my blog and she said, but the recipes and the food seem to be taking off. So why don't we do that book first? And then the second book will be this book. So that first book, Dr. Leaf, was exactly 10 years ago to this year. It was called The Beauty Detox Solution. It got really big. It sold like 1 million copies. So of course, the second book, they wanted to do another food book. But then the third book started coming back into chakras and energy. And then the fourth book I wrote with Deepak Chopra. So it was starting to go this way. But here we are 6 books later. And this, Dr. Leaf, I know like these are the most powerful teachings. This is my playbook for how I've been able to create abundance and real love and my dream family and get past all the self-doubt and the self-hatred, really, and all the anxiety. So, and I also just feel like, not everybody has access to all of this stuff. I went through thousands of pages of scripture and old, very ancient writings from thousands of years ago, the Vedas specifically. And then I present them with stories so we can see how they're really applicable for modern life, and also scientific research, which I know resonates with you very much, just to show the connection of all these things.
What a lovely story. What a lovely journey. And I love the fact that it's just so humble. It's just like, these as you found yourself. And I always said that there's something you can do that no one else can do. But when you in yourself, you just generate this love and passion as humans, and it enhances other people. So your life is very evident of that, and how you've reached people in so many ways without even trying. You just became yourself, and you poured out that love. When we feel like, you know this, when your book talks about that, when we are ourselves, when we're in our identity. And I just gave a lecture at my most recent mental health conference on the importance of self-boundaries and love, and how that's core. And with all my patients, for 25 years when I practiced and 38 years of research, I would always start with identity and self-love. And you've basically you've basically pulled that all together beautifully in this book. So I want to thank you for the book.
Thank you.
And thank you for really emphasizing that. So let's dive in. Take us on a journey, the best way that you know how, through this book, so people can get an idea and how to go through it to get the best out of it.
So I do recommend reading the book in order. There are 3 parts. The first part is about, well, first of all, let's take a step back. The book overall is about connecting in the language of yoga to the true self. And I know this really resonates with you, Dr. Leaf, and we talked about it in our podcast as well. So in yoga, there is the pseudo self, which is the ego, which is always sensing things out here. So there's nothing wrong. Of course, we're embodied. We're meant to be in the world. But the issue is when we over-identify our self-worth with all the doing and all that we see. So then if we think, oh, look at what such and such is doing on Instagram or Twitter, and look at me, look at my life, that's when we start to feel small and limited. And that's where we get into that comparison mindset. And I'm not enough is out here. So, but this shell actually of what we're doing and what we look like, is what Wayne Dyer calls the less than 2% of who we are. Who we really are in yogic terms is the true self. So it's this formless part of us. It's this energy inside of us.
The mind that I always talk about. The mind. Yes. Yeah. It's the unus.
Gravitational field. Mm-hmm. In spiritual terms, we can say, if this resonates with anyone, spirit individualized inside. So it's this drop of consciousness of who we are. And this is practical, right? Dr. Leaf, this isn't just like woohoo, like that sounds nice. This is an inner resource that we can count on and go to and actually work on our connection with, to hone our intuition and live in our hearts and have this really stable part of us that's infinitely creative. But it's almost like when I started tapping in, it felt like I was taking a step back from all the drama of life, and you witness more instead of getting your energy pulled in. So the whole book is about living from the true self more and more. So this is the path. The subtitle of the book is Practical Enlightenment for Everyday Life. Enlightenment means more freedom, awakening. So it doesn't mean we have to be fully enlightened, like we hear about Buddha or Jesus, but it's about getting on a path and having really practical tools for if you feel triggered, or if you feel not enough, or if you feel small or frustrated. I wanted the book to be very practical. So you'll see every chapter has a lot of exercises and meditation techniques and actual teachings in bringing us back to center. So the way it's structured is part one is about getting past the big blocks. So Yogananda teaches that there are 26 soul qualities that we need to develop as humans in order to fulfill our highest potential. And the number one, guess what the number one is, Dr. Leaf? Fearlessness. So we may not think about, oh, fearlessness is the most important, but think about it. If it's true, like we're either in love, expansion, or we're in fear. Fear is the biggest
exactly,
block.
love or fear. Mm-hmm.
I'm not even getting on the path in the first place. So we continue to feel blocked and small. So part one is really about getting past the biggest blocks. There's a chapter on wholeness and going past identifying who we are with our behaviors, which is really usually the wounded ego acting out. So it's really connecting to who we are, that steady part of us beyond the good and the bad. So then part two is about, once we get past the blocks, embodying more of the true self qualities. So this is where we talk about peace and intuition and so on, and confidence, which I would love to talk about more in a second. And then the third part, Dr. Leaf, is once we get that down, then we go into creator mode. So there's the longest chapter of the book is called You Are a Creator. And it's very specific practices for taking our formless energy and our unique gifts and the unique ways in which we can bring our energy, our ideas to the world, and how we put it into practice, how we create our best stuff. There's also a chapter there on abundance and magnetism. So once we're more anchored in the true self, and of course, we're going to dip in and out, but these practices help us go back to center. Then we can start to really create. And that's what I found in my life, Dr. Leaf, when I look at where I was broke. I didn't know what I was going to do with my life. My family thought I was crazy because I spent all this money going to Georgetown, going to this fancy school, and then I was just backpacking. But then I came back into this center and I really found my voice and I found the way to channel my creativity. I believe we're all infinitely creative. And then it just was like I stepped into this river of flow and everything kept unfolding. And that's what I want everybody to know. It doesn't have to feel like all this pushing, this arduous pulling and pushing things in. There is this part of us, I think, that usually remains dormant, this part of our personality, which we can turn on, when we get past the primal fear that is so often, attached to our identity.
I love it. So are you going to go into a little bit more detail? You've got the chapter on the block, then second part, the confidence, finding the flow, and then the third part, how to be creative. So it's the block, and then it's the
so it's getting past the biggest blocks.
And then it's
and then it's really embodying this power, really letting it flow.
That's in you, letting it flow, which is mind. I mean, we're talking about mind. We're talking about the block. That mind is your aliveness. So you're telling us, basically, for my audience who have listened to me for so long, what Kimberly is talking about here is practical steps on how to tune into what's blocking you, release your identity, and then what's going to actually help you experience that peace, and then from there, how to use it. Have I summarized that?
Exactly.
All right. So are you going to now take us through a little bit more depth in each part?
Yes. So I'd love to talk about confidence for a moment, because I think that, I don't know about you, Dr. Leaf, but I get so many questions about people not feeling confident and not really feeling sure of themselves and really struggling to feel enough, good enough. These like repeated themes for all of us. And it really is, it comes down to, in my belief system, it comes down to one core issue, which is that we're over-identified with the ego. Right. So when it comes to confidence, I used to try to get more confidence. Again, this getting from the outside. I tried to get more confidence by being skinnier or having a better body or constantly, tinkering with my hair or like all this outside stuff. And there's nothing wrong with that, but it's, this by definition is always going to shift and change. And then I was also a huge, huge perfectionist, Dr. Leaf. So I was obsessed with grades. I always had to be number one. I always had to get straight A's. And whoa, would my self-esteem tank if anything was less than. So it was all this like doing and all this looking and everything out here. So by definition, this is always changing. It's not a steady place to put our confidence in. So as I started getting into these teachings and going deeper and deeper into the practice and into my meditation, it's like layers of an onion. You keep peeling away. Well, where does real confidence come from? So in the book, I talk about surface confidence and then true confidence. So at the very, very base of it, comes down to when Moses, by the way, is the name of my second son. Moses went and, asked the Almighty, what is it that you are? What is this? And the simple statement, which resonates so much with me, I am that I am. So the I am is when we merge from our limited little egos into this greater divine intelligence, the universe, whatever we want to say. But it's simple. I am that I am. So true confidence comes from I am alive and I'm breathing and I'm a unique creation of spirit. And that is it. I'm not confident. I feel good if I, do this project really well, or if I look great in my dinner for with my husband or whatever it is. But that's fun stuff that we enjoy. Our self-worth should not be tied to anything external like that. So the practice
that is
of
brilliant.
really
Yeah, so important.
Breathing in and out, feeling our body and starting to connect with our energy gives us that confidence, gives us that peace. So I say, Dr. Leaf, we can't really create that. We can't really create a connection and confidence and peace unless we spend time with the energy inside.
It's like you've got to get to know it, if that makes any sense. We've got you so clearly say with the ego identification, if we translate that into just living in the world today, we're comparing ourselves to social media, we're living up to other people's expectations, we're being shaped by the world. So you're so busy trying to be shaped by the world that you've forgotten all about yourself. So if I hear you correctly, you're saying, block that all off and just who are you, and spend that time getting in touch with who are you, and then you can go look at the outside as fun stuff. The important things, that nice meal and that looking nice, there's nothing wrong with those if those are in the right perspective, if they're done in the right sense, if they're done based on a value system of yourself that is strong. Am I hearing you correctly? Is that what you are saying?
That's right. That's right, Dr. Leaf. So it was really important to me to make the book practical. And that's why it says practical, because I love Eckhart Tolle. I love these teachers, but sometimes I read these books and I think, well, how am I supposed to live this? What do I do?
Yeah.
So what that means practically, let's say the average person, the average woman that I work with, she gets up and even before she's out of bed, she picks up her phone and she starts looking on Instagram or she's in email. So there isn't this moment of self-connection before getting pulled out into the ego. So again, it doesn't mean that we can't do these things and we can't be on social media, but we want to balance outer practices and practices. So even from the morning, and my morning practice includes having hot water with lemon, putting something in your body that's going to help stoke digestion and you feel that fullness, taking probiotics, all these things that are great in the morning, but also as a steady practice, spending, in the practical enlightenment meditations that I put out every week are about 7 minutes. So really, even if it's 10 minutes, just 7 minutes, if you do one of my guided meditations, connecting with the energy here first. Feel your breath, feel your feet on the ground, feel that we're here. We can't make great change unless we harmonize here first in this moment. So as part of the morning routine, I highly recommend a morning meditation. And then same thing in the evening when we're working to separate the day from our minds. I have 2 babies now, Dr. Leaf. My youngest is just turned 17 months. Well, he's not a baby. The other one's 5. But still,
they're busy. They're busy at a busy age. We high demand physically and mentally and emotionally. So,
it's a lot. But but it's this evening, come down period. Their evening routine. They have about an hour. So same thing as humans. I think we need that time to reflect. I'm a big journaler. I put out a lot of journal prompts. So just introspection, which is a Sanskrit word, svadhyaya, which is one of the niyamas, one of the limbs of yoga, is about awareness. What were my patterns? What triggered me today? You and I talked about this. Why does that bother me so much?
Gathering awareness. Mm-hmm.
through journaling, oh my gosh, Dr. Leaf, what I started to see was I get really annoyed when people interrupt me or they don't agree with me. If I spend a long time trying to share my opinion, this is in the past, and they still don't agree. Oh, it's not that great to eat a lot of dairy, whatever it was, they would get annoyed. So I would get annoyed. And then I started to see, oh, it's triggering not being seen and not being heard. And that triggers this wound I have of feeling, oh, I'm not lovable enough to be seen and heard. And so I started to go deeper and deeper into that through these practices. And then I saw, oh, I can actually validate myself. I can love myself. I can soothe myself. So the practice of introspection, not to get off topic, and then meditation in the evening as well. And then some of these practices are so, oh my gosh, you can do them in 90 seconds too, Dr. Leaf.
Why don't you do one with us? Why don't you do whichever one you want? Maybe the confidence, whatever.
Well, that one is, I am that I am. There's a breathing practice for when you start to feel triggered, when you see something, let's say it's something on Facebook, or you see someone annoys you at a party. It's a practice for coming back to center. But the one I want to share first, the preliminary one, Dr. Leaf, is about this concept of getting into the gaps.
I was going to ask you about that. I wanted you to, so good. You've preempted my question. Yeah.
Yes. So when you think about gaps, they're moments of pauses. And if there aren't gaps in music, it just sounds like, a chaotic mess. Or if we don't take gaps between eating and chewing well enough, we end up overstuffing ourselves. So gaps are what we want to create between thoughts so that we can really pause and connect back in instead of being overreactive. Gaps are when we find stillness so that we're not acting out patterns or trying to figure out what people want from us versus what's organically arising from the true self, from our own talents. So this practice is the preliminary one before we get into the subsequent 3 chapters afterwards, which go deeper into an effective meditation practice. And I say effective, Dr. Leaf, because, it's not just about relaxing, because that's like I'm relaxing the senses. Remember, yoga really means union. So when we're meditating, we want to create union between this limited self and merge with divine consciousness, with the I am consciousness, with greater intelligence, universal, life force, energy, whatever word you want to use about union. So anyways.
Union, beautiful word, union.
Yes, union, greater expansion instead of limitation. So this practice teaches us, and we'll do it together for a few rounds, Dr. Leaf, is to pay attention to the little micro gaps in between your inhales and exhales. So what this teaches in yoga, when you look at the scriptures, a lot of the breath work, as you go into meditation, as you go from pratyahara, withdrawing the senses, into dhyana, dharana, deeper and deeper into concentration, your breath is meant to get more slow and calm. So some of the breath work that's really like exciting and like makes you like, really fast, that's for something else. But right now we want to drop deep, deep, deep into our center. And let's try this practice together, Dr. Leaf. So if you go ahead and just close your eyes. So we're going to be inhaling and exhaling for a count of 4, but then we're going to hold the little pauses in between, and I'll give the instructions here. Okay, so we'll exhale completely. Okay, then we'll start to inhale. 2, 3, 4, and then just pause full at the top with the breath in. And then exhale. 2, 3, 4, and then pause empty at the bottom. Lungs empty. And then again, inhale. 2, 3, 4, and pause full at the top. And exhale. 2, 3, 4. Pause empty. And inhale. And continue. You can just keep breathing now. But you can see that was such a short practice. We just did 2 rounds, Dr. Leaf. But did you start to just feel,
Oh, totally. Yeah, totally relaxed. I love that one. Yeah, that's so nice.
So what we see, it's so simple, but the yogis teach us it's true stillness is actually in between the inhales and the exhales when we're just not doing something. So if we just start to tune in, our, where we put our energy really expands. So if we just start to feel that stillness, like, oh, I'm here, I'm me. I don't need all this stuff from the outside world, just beingness. Then that starts to expand more and more in our life, in our relationships, self-sovereignty, not getting pulled into drama as much, not trying to convince people, not trying to control. This stillness is so powerful. It's the building block of real peace in our life. And it just starts to expand. So what I really want to emphasize too, Dr. Leaf, is this, what I'm talking about in this book is not that you have to, completely overhaul your whole life. A lot of these practices just take a few moments in the day, in the morning, in the evening, throughout the day if you get triggered. But it's like, if the Titanic changed 1 degree, history would have been changed. So it's the idea of we're putting energy, we're pulling it in little by little, and it starts to create really big changes over time.
I love that. I love the concept of the gap. I love that focus because of the busyness of our lives today, and we almost like we've got a hurry sickness. It's literally a hurry sickness where we've got to try and find quick fixes. So people think that is a waste of time. But so this trains you to the focus on the gap will train you that's actually enriching your time and making everything else more valuable because you're learning how to connect with yourself. Because people have disconnected from themselves. This is why there's such a lot of value issues and identity issues. Because you've been we don't know how to come back to ourselves. So that's such a simple little practice that can, from what I'm hearing you teach, just simple little practices to bring you back into that moment, which is amazing. It's so simple. We do this. People breathe and hold their breath. But look at it's the perspective that you hold around that inhale of 4 and then that gap moment. It's beautiful. Can you talk a little bit more about the gap? I really like that.
Yes.
I love that and how that expands and generalizes into all aspects of your life.
So the concept of the true self is meant to be something that we experience. It's not just something that we intellectually understand. So you can read something and be like, oh, okay, I get it. This is what the yogis are talking about. But it is the experience of just this deep, deep, deep inner awareness. It starts to increase our self-realization of who we are. So these practices are meant to give us that experience. And that's like fuel, Dr. Leaf, that keeps us going more and more. Because I know the mornings when I don't meditate, I feel very off. But then when I have this experience, so it's really just getting on the path and finding these gaps, we start to feel, oh my gosh, that day I had more creative ideas. That day I was less reactive. All these things start to happen. So then these gaps you start to see, I like gaps. Gaps give me order. I'm going to start to create more gaps in my life. So for me, one of the first things I did, which was the best decision I ever made, was I started to batch social media. Right. And all this outside stuff that's coming in. So now I don't have alerts coming in all day, right? To take away all the gaps between thoughts. I only go on, let's say like 8 to 8:15 or, 1 to 2, whatever times I need to go on. And then the rest of the time, there's the gap from out here. Otherwise, how am I supposed to write? How am I supposed to, play with my kids? Yeah, do all these things. So it's really starting to understand this taking back of our power. Because like you said, Dr. Leaf, there's so much confusion and there's so much anxiety with people not getting lost. People are writing into me, I feel like my life doesn't have meaning. I don't know who I am. We don't know who we are because we're always out here. So these gaps become critical for our mental health and for feeling really happy and fulfilled. So you should, I say I should to myself, but no one should do anything. It's more if it resonates with you, to actually schedule your meditations in the morning and the evening to create that gap. I also like to create a gap midday where I check in, I put my phone away, I sit and I think, is my energy, like, where's my energy? Where am I right now? Am I attuned to the true self, or have I started to go out too much into over identifying with the ego? And I take 10 or 15 minutes to call my energy back in, because there's still a very full day ahead and I can sort of self-assess and see what's going on. And that becomes really, really powerful. The other thing that's important, that's powerful about gaps, Dr. Leaf, and I recommend this in the book, is that we do these meditations and it goes deeper and deeper. Oh, Dr. Leaf, you'll love the other 3 chapters because we take the gaps and we build on that practice. But we do the practice And then we bring in a deeper introspective practice. So maybe I'll bring up the wholeness practice.
I'd love that, because in going through the book, I really like, that's why I honed in on the gaps, because I'd love to take that deeper, because it's something that I didn't use the same wording that you're using, but I've taught my patients how to use the thinker moment and how to get in tune with yourself. So I'm so into this. So yeah, please
just take
it, take it where you want to go, because without that, you can just throw information at people and people just can't get it, but they don't bring it into who they are. Because we're so capable of storing information and building it all in, but there's this huge, I call it a chasm, but it's actually a gap. It's almost like a negative chasm that is, here's what I know I am, but that's how I'm functioning. And what you're telling us with the gap, if I'm understanding you correctly, is we need to bring these two together. We need to bring it to cross that chasm between who I know I am and how I'm functioning. We need the gap moments to be able to stand back and see, so that we can reconnect with ourselves, which then brings us into perspective and alignment.
Exactly. The gaps, the more we get into the practice, and again, just spending a few moments regularly in the mornings, really getting into these gaps helps us step back. Again, I'll use this Sanskrit word again, pratyahara, which is one of the limbs of yoga, Dr. Leaf. It means we're withdrawing the senses. So if it's like, it's so important what people are saying, and if they like us, or if they like our post, and, we get into arguments and comments, all this stuff, it means that all our attention, it's like all these little rivulets, like it's all being dissipated out, versus really pulling our power into the Sushumna Nadi, into the central energy channel. And so, as you were saying, there is a divide sometimes in who we are. And I believe our soul qualities of who we really are is unconditional love and kindness and compassion.
Oh, yes, I agree. Mm-hmm.
That's
what we're made of. That's what we're made of.
That's what we're made of.
Yeah, and scientifically we see it. Sorry, I mean to interrupt. Scientifically we see it too. We're literally wired for love, neurophysiologically, and then also in the quantum fields of the mind.
Yes, love, harmony, expansion, oneness. So all these, the wounded ego that has, slights, you've talked about this, memories that make us feel like we act out these patterns. Sometimes there is this divide between who we know we are and our behavior. So in the whole chapter, and I've worked with quite a few people that have a lot of shame and things that they've done. So I'll use the example of a friend of mine who comes to our Saluna circle, and she reached out to me personally about something that had happened. She had cheated on her husband, and then he got really angry and he emailed their whole wedding list, Dr. Leaf, 270 people, including the grandmothers and everybody. And so she just had this heavy cloak of shame. She walked around with for some years, and she gained all this weight, and she started dating someone and they cheated on her too. So that's in part one. This is about getting past the biggest blocks. So here's the thing, and the yogis say this, until we are anchored in the true self, in the divine, whatever word we want to use, our behavior is always going to be unreliable. And what we need to do, we need to look at our behavior, Dr. Leaf, and we need to take the lessons. We need to clean up the mess, apologize, or do whatever we need to do, but then we need to let it go, because otherwise this heaviness of shame and guilt actually weighs us down. It dims our light, and we can't really help support other people. We can't fully unconditionally love other people if we have the guilt and the shame.
We're talking the same language. Do you remember in our previous podcast, when you interviewed me, we got so carried away with the whole how we show up and how we function is not who we really are, and how we've got to gather that, and we've got to deconstruct and reconstruct. I mean, this is what we're talking that it's vital. You can't move forward if we don't deal with it, and we can deal with them. We've got this power in us.
Exactly. So Dr. Leaf, it's like we're using different language for the same stuff.
Same concepts.
I'm talking about
but I love how you talk
your
about
neuroscience.
But you're bringing in more language around the core concept of being wired for love. You're giving us better language for understanding what that feels like, which is beautiful. This book really tunes into that and how to find that and make that part of your everyday reality and grow it.
So this is a big concept here, is the sun moon practice that I'd love to share from the You Are Whole chapter. And this brings up the concept of our shadow a bit, which is Carl Jung talks about this as well, the disowned parts of us, the parts of us that we don't like to show and we don't like to talk about. So I definitely recommend doing the gaps practice first. doing a meditation first, and then just coming to a place of real stillness and calmness, as much as we can muster. And then what this practice entails is getting out your journal, getting out some paper. And on one column, you write your sun qualities. So it's not as linear as this, but this is how we're explaining it here. So the sun qualities are the things that you like to share about. Oh, I'm a good friend. I'm patient. I'm a good listener. I share my stuff, whatever it is. And that's easy to recall. But then we want to sit and breathe and show up for ourselves and then write our moon qualities. So the shadow side. And, be really honest. And sometimes, you do this privately. That's sometimes hard to go in there, but it's incredibly freeing. You can write out, I actually can be pretty judgmental, and I can be mean, and I can be petty, and I can be stingy, or whatever words you want to use. And you sit. And even as I say those words, those have strong energy, I can feel sensations coming up and going, right? So it's just these sensations of the ego, which has a reaction in identifying, wants to push away, say, no, that's not me. But the problem is if we don't bring these things to the surface, then they kind of remain these disowned parts of us. So it's like DRLEAF, someone looking at you and being like, oh, hello, and wanting you to like them. But then deep down in the back of their subconscious, they may think, oh, but if you know how I was, or if you know that I did these things, you wouldn't really like me. So it's like we're almost self-sabotaging and we're not really bringing our full light. So in this practice, we meditate and then we bring up our sun list and then we bring up the moon list and then we look at them side by side and we let the sensations come and go. And there's a lot more detail in the book.
Yeah, I saw that you've actually got the little chart that you had put up.
Yes.
And yeah.
but in summary here, but
that's what I was looking for. When you
want to look at them. And then you want to feel whatever goes on. And remember, these sensations, the rising and falling, are of the ego, right? The true self is this bliss, is this stable place. And then at the end, we want to affirm, we want to go and really do this ending practice of saying, I am beyond all of these behaviors, so-called the good ones and the bad ones. There's this stable part of me. And I can see, oh, wow, I hurt some people. I hurt myself. I accept that. But I understand that, we're all multidimensional. We all have light and dark inside of us. Darkness is the challenge for all of us, right? And darkness is really just doesn't have light yet. So these practices, and there's another one about bringing out your shadows. There's 3 of them in the fear chapter. When we start to bring these out into the light, now they're starting to get nourished. Now they're getting hydrated. We can see them and we can start to release shame and heaviness. And then we can start to go to the stableness underneath all of the behaviors. If we're so fixated on our behaviors, DRLEAF, we're still an ego. We're still acting out of the wounded ego. We're still trying to say, I'm a good person if I do this and this and this, or I'm a bad person. Well, the true self is actually underneath all that. And the more we connect with the true self, the natural extension of that, like you said, we go back into our natural state. So we go into this pure beingness where I'm me, you're you. We don't have to be competitive. I see the light in me. I see the light in you. You're more forgiving, more understanding of behaviors. Hey, we're all stumbling along. It doesn't mean we don't make healthy boundaries. If someone's, darkness is actually infringing, we have to put up healthy boundaries. But at the same time, we start to have more depth, more wisdom, more understanding of this beingness versus the doingness.
That's so wonderful. That's so beautiful. And it's so doable. It's hard work, but once you start training yourself to recognize that inner core wired for love nature, that's in our spirit nature, and then plays out in our mind and our body, the more you tune into those signals, the more you can move forward. So that's what you're teaching people how to do that. And the neuroscience is we can do that every 10 seconds, which means we can constantly, when we're conscious, be aware and tune in. It just teaches us so much of a more peaceful life, because that inner critic and then the critic of others is just so disruptive. And you said something that I loved as well. I always talk about enhancement, and you said there that it's we less judgmental of others. It's not competition. I was so pleased when you brought up the statement, it's not about competition, because no one can do what you can do. There's this, you can do something that no one else can do. So we've got to go into enhancement, but we live in a world that just rewards competition all the time. Meanwhile, the true growth will come from enhancement versus competition. But that's a concept that's very hard to kind of break in today's cultural society and just how people focus. I don't know how you feel about that.
For me, Dr. Leaf, I was, when you said that, it made me realize that in the beginning, I was always talking about this stuff. And you're like, oh, but then, the food part came up. But now you see the food part was kind of how I was always talking about this stuff from the beginning. So when I was working with these celebrities, it was really about emotional well-being, processing, meditating, and I'm so grateful. Drew Barrymore gave this cover quote about, I've been working with her for more than a decade and creating more peace and joy in her life. Right. So you have a later galley there, Doctor. But anyways, it's like now I can talk about this more in terms, because I think this is the most important thing. I think when we start to get more of this rootedness, food, diet, body automatically becomes easier because we're not transposing our needs into these externals, whether it's food.
Exactly, which are exhausting.
It's exhausting. So for me, Dr. Leaf, I'll share, and I talk about this in the book. I went through the hardest time in my life about 4 years ago, and I was at my rock bottom. So it's easy to like go in and out of practices when things are going really well.
Absolutely. That's very normal part of being human.
But when you have rock bottom, that's when you realize like, okay, like you're clinging, you go into it because you don't have anything else. And for me, my rock bottom was, my older son wasn't one yet. And my mom passed away really suddenly. So we found out she had cancer on Valentine's Day, and then she passed March 29th. So it was literally 6 weeks. And that was like a big shock. And then I kind of looked around at my life and I said, Dr. Leaf, I said, this is not what I want. Meaning with my partner, it wasn't the deep emotional connection. So then I ended up moving out a few months later. So I was a new mom. I lost my mom, and then I became a single mom in like this span of time. And so I was not talking about it that much. Like I was embarrassed, about and sometimes when you get divorced, whatever, it was just like all this stuff out
here. All that
here.
shame and all what the world tells you failed or whatever, but meanwhile you haven't. Yeah.
So I went deep inside and I met with a monk at the Self-Realization Fellowship, which is Yogananda's meditation organization. And he said to me, Kimberly, he said, treat your home like an ashram for 5 months. So that's what I did, Dr. Lee, for 5 months. This is before COVID. I took care of my child. I did work, but I just went into the scriptures. I just read the Mahabharata and the Upanishads and the New Testament of the Bible and all these teachings. And I meditated and I got really anchored inside of me. And when I came out 5 months later, and then, some months after that, something really amazing happened. But I had this trust for the first time, Dr. Leaf. I felt trust in myself, trust in the true self, trust in life versus before I was always trying to micromanage and control things, I realized, because my ego didn't feel safe. And I started to feel this trust. And you know what, Dr. Leaf, I felt whole for the first time. So I was walking around, I started to emerge, I was going out in the world, and I felt this love inside of me. And that's another whole other topic, is the love comes inside of the love chapter. I think is really powerful. So anyways, I'm walking around and I get invited to this random dinner party, Dr. Leaf, with about 12 people. And it was a podcast dinner. So it was someone who had come on my podcast. I went on his, whatever. I didn't know him that well. So I was like, okay. So I go to this podcast dinner with 12 people in Venice Beach. And then one of them ends up being my future husband, John. But oh my gosh, I tell you this, Dr. Leaf, because at first, if I wasn't in my heart, if I talk about,
you would have missed it.
Oh yeah, I would have missed it. I was in this deep place of feeling and sensing energy. I wasn't just out here with my physical eyes. I was tuned into the inner vision. So John comes along. Imagine this, Dr. Leaf. You see me like I'm, pretty normal looking. John comes in from the neck down, completely covered in tattoos, gold grill in his teeth, really into motorcycles and MMA fighting. And, before, oh my God, this is so not my type. This is so not the guy I would date or marry. But right away, I just felt this heart connection. And so we sat on the couch and we just talked, Dr. Leaf. And he said within 15 minutes, he knew I was going to be his wife, even though he told his friends he would never get married. And then 3 days later, he told me he loved me. I mean, it just like unfolded. And I just think I was in this place of deep connection, I received it. And I think, oh my gosh, Dr. Leaf, how many people let their soulmate walk by? Or I could have let him walk by. And now
and other things. Yeah, that's unreal.
Opportunities. And I talk about this in the magnetism chapter as well, how I went to write a book with Deepak Chopra, who was my, childhood hero. I read all his books. So there are specific practices and techniques for working with your energy and your frequency and your vibration and honing it. So especially in the intuition chapter, I was going deeper into my gut and working with that. And so that's how I was able to, I didn't even call John in. It was a flow. We met and then it was there.
It just happened. Just flew.
Just happened. So I think about all this stuff that seems so arduous, like finding someone, going on all the dating apps, losing weight, and the abundance chapter too is so powerful, Dr. Leaf. Maybe, anyways, I just want to say it doesn't have to be so arduous. There's this flow of energy when we connect inside. So abundance is really about showing up with in the fullness of this moment without lack, without looking at what's missing. So that's another big question I get is how do I move into more abundance, which isn't just financial prosperity, although that's part of it, but abundance of love, opportunities, peace, resources, all these different things. So in the abundance chapter, I talk about, Dr. Leaf, how we focus more on our inner state. And it's this repeated vibration of fullness that's registered outwardly in the world and by other people. And then that starts to create the outer form of abundance coming in. Whereas most people look at the lack of what's coming in and they focus and they get frustrated or they're fixated on the outside. But to create real abundance, we focus first here, and then this energy transforms life from the inside out.
Can we go into that in a little bit more depth? Because I love it. It's such an important concept. And the reason why I'd love to just spend a couple of minutes rounding off. And then there's so many other things that you and I discussed before, but we're not going to get to before we even started recording. So we're going to do a part 2. So listeners, don't worry. There's going to be a part 2. So for this one here, let's just talk a little bit more about abundance, because you briefly touched on the fact that it's not just financial. If you go after the finance, the inner core, it's abundance from your inside out. So people have heard that concept. So can you unpack that a little bit more? And what is that, if you can, if there's enough time to unpack it on a more practical level? Because the chapter on that is really good.
Oh, yes, yes.
Yeah.
So we think about abundance. And if it was as simple as, I've got a bunch of money in the bank, then, let's be honest, the happiest people on the planet would be Jeff Bezos and, the really rich people. And it's not just that. It's not just the money, and if you're listening to this right now and you're with Dr. Leaf and you're with me, I know you're looking for more than that. So abundance is it's a state of plenty. It's this fullness. It's, the cup is overflowing versus lack. Lack is the ego. Lack is looking at what is missing. Lack is comparing and saying, her coat is nicer than mine, or I should have more of this, whatever.
Yeah, whatever it is. Yeah,
exactly. It could be a million different things. It's lack-based thinking. So the antidote to that is the solution isn't found where the problem is. Right. So the problem is in lack and focusing out here. So what we don't want to do is continue to hyperfixate outside and say, this isn't coming in fast enough, blah, 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 and get continually more frustrated and more lack energy. The solution is found in a different system, and the different system is focusing on the inner state. So connecting back to the true self, which misses nothing, which is abundant by definition. So in the practice in the abundance chapter, what we want to do is we do the preliminary meditations, and then we start to focus on the heart, which is known as the Untitled Chapter, the heart energy right here. And we start to self-generate feelings of fullness and abundance overflowing. And sometimes it can be good to have a couple images that we work with in our meditations, Dr. Leaf, or sometimes it's if you're having a really tough time in life, maybe it's a memory or it's a movie or something. But this idea of self-generating emotions is something that the Heart Math Institute talks about a lot as well. And it talks about we become less and less dependent on something outside of ourselves to bring in this energy. It's the energy that we want to feel. So we sit for a couple moments in the morning. If you're really trying to call in abundance, whether it's financial or in love, I recommend doing this at least twice a day. You do the preliminary, you do this in the gaps, and then you self-generate and you focus here, not in your mind, or you say not in your brain, Dr. Lee, but here in your heart.
Mind, go into the depths of your spiritual mind. Yeah, the
deep depths of your spiritual mind, here in your heart specifically, and you focus on self-generating fullness, just expansion, nothing's missing. And then you send it out, you radiate it out. You imagine energy is going out 360 degrees all around. And then you saturate yourself in that vibration. And then you start the day in that. And then if you start to feel dinged around a little bit, there's a practice in the confidence chapter that you come back to center, and then you can work on self-generating more and more. When I did this, Dr. Leaf, I mean, I told you before I was broke. And then I started to get into this flow, and I share this because it's like, we bought this amazing house in the mountains before COVID started. And then we were just able to buy our farm in Hawaii. We went back and forth to Kauai over the past summer. And I just think, wow, like where I was to here I am. And of course, the soulmate love. Oh, my babies, the love. And so I know this is possible for everybody, but I look back at my pattern of I was hyper fixated on what was going on and trying to control things and get things from other people. Being in a conversation, trying to get something is very different than just showing up and sharing and being in love. And so sometimes we feel like we have to manipulate and do things, but I promise you that is not the most powerful way. Most powerful way was when I started doing this practice and self-generating. That repeated vibration inside of you will start to create a match energetically. There's a frequency to it. And so more people are drawn. Oh, you seem so passionate. How can I help you? What do you do? Like people will just start to come in and things will start to happen. And it's a very real, you talk about frequencies a lot, Dr. Leaf. It's something that, maybe the conscious brain doesn't get, but it's registered. And so this practice of self-generating and radiating out on a regular basis, even if it's just 3 minutes a day, is very powerful.
Very powerful. So the way I relate that to my work, and for the listeners who have heard me so often, this is the non-conscious mind that you're talking about. The non-conscious mind works 24/7 and drives everything. And it's got at its core wired for love nature. And that's what you want to tune into to be able to then do whatever else is that you need to do. So basically that's exactly what people can relate to in this conversation that they're listening. They can relate. This is the non-conscious we're talking about.
Yes.
So your mind's driving brain and body. So we don't have to get out of our brain. What we have to do is we have to get into our unconscious mind. And that's what you're teaching, is to get into that mind, because that's where the wisdom is. That's where the abundance is. That's where, because you need wisdom to be abundant and to get priorities right and perspectives right. If we're just focusing on the outside, our perspectives are so screwed because we're focusing on, I have to have what I can't have. I have to have what that person's got.
It's unstable.
That's all it's unstable. It's distorted. It's not, you may hit and miss. You may get lucky and get lots of money in that way or whatever, but that's not going to be sustainable or bring you the peace. So I totally agree. When you do that, you activate your mind, brain, and body or psychoneurophysiologically correctly. I love it. Listen, we need part 2. For now, we have to end because I have to do another interview. Yes. Where can people get hold of you? Where can they get hold of the book? How can they find out more?
So the book is out everywhere now. You are more than you think you are, wherever books are sold, Barnes & Noble, Amazon, anywhere. To get more information about me, everything's on my website, mysoluna.com, which is SOLLUNA.com, including our products, our courses, Feel Good podcast, and the Soluna Circle and more.
Wonderful. Fantastic. We'll put all those links in the show note. And thank you so much. It's been amazing chatting again. I love talking to you.
I love you so much, Dr. Leaf. I just feel so connected to you.
Vice versa. Feel the same. Thank you so much. And I can't wait for you to come on my show again.
Amazing. And same here. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you everyone for joining us today. I know you've learned so much. Join me again next time.